If you were to ask me what my 5 favorite games of all time were, I'd tell you, from bottom to top, Banjo-Tooie, Hades, Doom, Crash Team Racing, and Crash Bandicoot Warped. But why does the marsupial steal the top 2 positions? Well, before I was using empty laundry baskets to shield myself from imps and hell knights, my dad had bought me what I consider my first deep dive into video games, the one that would set me on my life path. Crash Bandicoot Warped had captured my small child brain in such a way that I couldn't step away from it. But what is it about Warped that made me enthralled with the series? And which version is the most ideal for you to play? Fair warning, the animation dweeb inside me is going to shine later on in this review. You have been warned. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. My name is Ty with MojoPlays, and this is my retro review of Crash Bandicoot Warped. Before we begin, we publish new videos every day, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. And if you're curious about what else I'm playing or want to see my ridiculous Burger King PS5 memes, follow me on Twitter at GhostWriterTyler. Warped picks up at the end of Crash 2's true ending, where Cortex's satellite has exploded into bits and is hurling into the Earth's atmosphere. However, one massive chunk of it has inexplicably shattered an ancient temple, freeing a malicious mask known as Uka Uka. With the help of one Dr. Nefarious Tropy, Cortex and Uka Uka plot to use Tropy's Time Twister to retrieve the power crystals from history. Crash and friends will have to hijack the machine and beat the Mad Doctors to the punch if they are to save the world.
Cortex, you have failed me twice!
Great Uka Uka!
Between the original 3 games, Warped has some of the most varied environments as well as gameplay. You have levels taking you to medieval times, ones that see you racing across desert highways, dinosaur chases in the prehistoric times, and even jet skiing around seas littered with pirates. For any kid, this would be the ultimate adventure, and you can imagine my awe and excitement whenever I booted up the game. Despite having several different playstyles working under the same engine, Warped manages to make them all work surprisingly well. Every level presents its own set of challenges with different enemies, forces you to use new moves to their full advantage, and, on top of that, excellent controls. Well, except for the racing levels. It didn't make much sense to incorporate tight turns and bending roads when it's almost impossible to turn and slow down without going off-road. Though I can forgive this, considering the racing levels are few and far between. As any Crash fan would expect, collecting the crystals won't be enough to see the real ending of the game. Gems and time relics add a layer of replayability by tasking you to smash every crate in the level, or reach the end in the shortest amount of time respectively. They aren't a cakewalk to accomplish, but they also aren't incredibly strenuous. Not compared to Crash 2 anyways. Speaking of which, it's a little jarring how Crash 2 and Warped are so different in terms of difficulty. Crash 2 is arguably the hardest game in the series. As for Warped, I found the game fairly easy to blast through, and I did so in 2 hours. Maybe it's because of the countless times I've played this game, but if I ever died, it was because of the overzealous daredevil in me, trying to pull off some ridiculous speedrun technique. Overall, jumps were simple, enemies weren't all that challenging to overcome, and I was able to finish a playthrough before lunch. As for the secret levels, I found their locations to be a bit obtuse. For example, one of the racing levels features a road sign with an alien on it, and running into it will send you into a secret level. But because of how fast you're going during this mission, it's a tad too hard to spot. The Sane Trilogy adds a couple of ways to make these secrets more obvious, thankfully. Said alien sign is now signified by a pigeon flying smack into it. Funny and suspicious. Now, I could go on about how awesome it was fighting Dingodile once more and witnessing the death animations for the first time in years, but not everything was sunshine and Wumpa Fruit galore. Much like my review on Doom 64, I wanted to play both the original and modern versions of Warped, to gauge whether this classic adventure of the marsupial has improved with age or deserved to be brought back into the modern public's eye. After playing through both iterations back to back, I started to form some grievances between both games. The most obvious issue was the controls. For all of you tykes who grew up during the Xbox 360 and PS3 eras, I encourage you to try and play your games with an original PlayStation controller. Just try to play for more than a couple of hours. If your left thumb hurts before the end of the first hour, congratulations! You have experienced what I call the dreaded D-pad spot. And let me tell you, it hurts like a Here is my thumb after 2 straight hours of playing the original Warped on PlayStation 1. That upside down triangle imprinted on my thumb was from the original PlayStation controller. So yes, playing with a DualShock or any other controller is better than using that torture rack for thumbs. Now, before someone has a meltdown, I do want to express my appreciation for the newer iteration. Vicarious Visions did an astounding job turning Sane Trilogy into the fully realized versions of the original games. But I can only say that in controls and overall visuals. Allow me to elaborate. When it comes to sound design, it's important for your game to not only seem believable, but feel believable. Let's take, for example, Boneyard, the 4th level in the game, more specifically, the dinosaur chase. In the original Warped, the Triceratops hides behind a wall of bones before bursting through it and begins chasing you. It's so sudden that when experiencing it for the first time, it puts the player on high alert. It creates a moment of tension, of suspense. What makes the chase even more intense is how loud and ferocious the stomps of the Triceratops are. The impact of the bones breaking, the stomps of the Triceratops, these two are what makes this chase one of Warped's most memorable moments. Now, let's look at the Insane Trilogy's version for a quick second. Notice how the bones fall in uniform fashion and how quiet the Triceratops is compared to the music. There's no tension, no sense of a threat, no intensity here. It's saddening to see one of the game's biggest highlights lose some of its luster here, especially given Vicarious Visions' exceptional track record in world building. My next grievance might be debatable to some. Another subsection of Warped's best moments were the plane and jet ski levels. The former saw you shooting down biplanes and blimps, while the latter let you race around seas filled with pirates. In the original, these levels felt expansive with their open areas and wide paths. Some may have felt these levels took too long to traverse, but I always felt that was part of the adventure. What are my boundaries in getting around this pirate ship? Can I make it to the next blimp before I'm shot down? The Insane Trilogy, for some reason, shrinks these down. I can sort of understand it if your goal was to save the player time, but to me, it makes these levels come off more restrictive and less impressive in scope. Again, a sense of world building has been lost in transition. I promise my possible blasphemy is almost over, as this next issue is the last. And trust me, this hurts me way more than you may think. There's no denying that Vicarious Visions was one of the best game studios when it came to animation, before it was folded into Blizzard recently. Love or hate Skylanders, you have to give credit where it's due. These folks know how to put a personality into a character's stance, movement, actions, expressions, etc. I remember after playing Insane Trilogy, I had told people that Vicarious Visions had managed to animate the characters almost the exact same ways I would have if I were in charge of the project. It fits the classic cartoon styles that influenced the original Crash Bandicoot and transforms the original trilogy into a fully realized version of itself. And before I continue, I want to give you one last warning. Animation Dweeb Tie is coming right now. The problem I have with Insane Trilogy is that while the animations bring more personality, they do most of the heavy lifting to mask the on-par voice acting while getting a tad too exaggerated at times. Maybe this is all just personal preference, but what made the original Time Twister messages so cool was how they were presented in a way similar to a message transmission. Going into a level, well, here's the next boss talking smack to you. Yes, you!
Them crystals are mine!
While characters were static, the limited animation and exceptional voice acting worked in tandem perfectly, and conveyed a character's personality. In the remake, the characters are moving around so much that it's a little distracting. There's little sense of depth and spacing in some areas that it makes these messages look a tad unnatural. Is Uka Uka really small or just hanging in the back? I can't tell.
It seems to have overlooked one small detail.
All in all, yes, I have a handful of problems with Warped both in its original form and the Sane Trilogy remake. However, I can recognize that I am a super fan. I am going to notice inconsistencies that others may view as nitpicky. Does that mean I suddenly think Warped isn't as great as 4-year-old Ty viewed it all those years ago? Did I realize I had spent a significant part of my childhood playing a god-awful game? One could not be further from the truth. I still love Warped with all of my heart, and it remains my favorite video game of all time. The game sparked an interest in animation inside me, and even the Sane Trilogy made me reconsider trying my hand at animation again back when it first came out. The variety in levels and gameplay had made me the gamer I am today. It doesn't do everything perfectly, but it does everything just right enough to call it one of the best Crash games and one of the best platformers I've had the pleasure of experiencing. And if I could pop the Platinum Trophy for this game again, I would.
There are still the gems. We still have a chance to triumph.
Check out these other great clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.